G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and today of course we are here to preview the new round, round 20. We are getting so close to the end of the season now. We've got about 9 teams of course vying for final spots. The Swans are pretty close, and speaking of the Sydney Swans of course, we start with the first matchup we're going to be taking a look at today. The Giants up against the Sydney Swans. The Sydney Smash, the Battle of the Bridge, the Sydney Derby, whatever you want to call it. This is going to be one of the biggest battles that we have seen in some time. Both teams are coming into this game in red hot form. GWS have won their last 5 games, while Sydney have won 5 of their last 6. And of course, Sydney have had the wood over the Giants in more recent times, with Sydney winning their last 5 encounters. Now, of course, both of these teams still have to keep on winning, as the Giants have a lot of teams behind them vying for spots in the top 8, while the Swans are one of those teams who are going to have to fight to get one of those spots in the 8 at the end of the season. Because if they lose the Swans from here, they are out of finals contention. I mean, it would be awfully fitting if the little brother was able to knock them off and knock them out of finals. But let's take a look at a couple of things that we need to take a look at for this game. First of all, on the injury front, GWS could see the return of Sam Taylor this week, after being out with a toe for some time. And we should also see the return of Josh Kelly and Jesse Hogan. While Sydney may get back Tom McCartan and Tom Papley, however, I think they'll take a lot more of a cautious approach with them too, so we'll have to wait and see throughout the week if those two return. Now, the last time these two teams met, Sydney made a unique decision to have their key forwards antagonise the key defenders of GWS in Taylor and Buckley, and it worked to pretty good effect. Now, in that occasion, it was Hamling and Francis who did the job, and I don't think the Swans will need to go down that route again. Hamling's been needed down in defence, and Francis really isn't that good of form. So I think we need to go with a bit of a different route for the Swans, and I think it's time for a bit of a different approach, and I'm going to call it Project Buller the Bully. I think this guy should be set the task to get under the skin of the Giants defenders, and I also think Hayden McLean needs to do the same. Not many teams have really used this tactic so far this season, other than the Swans, and it worked to good effect last time, so I think they might as well try it again and see what happens. I mean, the Swans really have nothing to lose here, so if there's a tactic they used last time and it worked, I think they should do it again. Now, a few matchups to keep an eye on down the Giants end. I think that Sam Wicks, what a season he's been having down back, he likely goes to Bedford or Jones. Rampy goes to Toby Green, who's had a really good matchup on him in recent times. Hamling probably gets the job on Jesse Hogan if McCartan is out, because I think that Melican has to go to Jake Stringer. Hamling won't be able to keep up with him at forward stoppage, and then if he pushes up the ground, I can't see a way where Hamling's going to be able to keep him covered. So Melican, I think, will get the job on him, which then leaves Aaron Cadman. Really hard to pick a matchup for this one, but it probably has to go to Nick Blakey, if I'm being honest. So if McCartan is in the lineup for the Swans, it will help a whole lot. But if he is out, the Swans are going to have to get a little bit creative on their matchups. Now, I think James Jordan will probably go to Lockie Whitfield, as he did earlier in the year, and kept him pretty well held. However, in the last couple of weeks, I've been a pretty big supporter of Finn Callaghan, and since his return from his mid-season injury, the Giants haven't lost a game. So I wouldn't be too surprised if James Jordan tries to match up on Callaghan at some point throughout this game, especially if he does get off the chain, but it's going to be a tough matchup. So now let's get to the tip, and I'm going to be going with the Sydney Swans. I think it's going to be one of the all-time games. I think it's going to be one of the games of the round, and I think it's going to be going right down to the wire. However, the reason why I'm going to be picking Sydney is they have had the wood over the Giants in more recent times, and with the Swans having Grundy, Heaney, and Goulden in red-hot form, I can't see a way where the Giants can stop all the Swans' weapons. But in saying that, the Giants' forward line is going to be really hard to stop, so I think it sets up for one of the biggest Sydney derbies in more recent times. I can't wait to see this one. Now, my brother has picked the Giants. He said that even though the Swans have good record over GWS, he's going with the Giants for the fact that Hogan should be back, Cadman is in best form, and he doesn't trust the Swans' forward line to kick a winning score. Another rivalry, of course, it is the Q Clash with the Gold Coast up against the Lions. Now, earlier in this season, it was built up as the biggest Q Clash in the Suns' history, and they failed that test. Now we get to the pointy end of the season, and the Suns need to win here against the Lions. And again, it's a history-defining Q Clash for the Gold Coast Suns once again. Now, Zach Bailey is a massive in for the Lions after missing last week through suspension, while the Suns can hopefully get back Sam Collins, who has missed the last few games, but Miller will be out, which is massive, so they do need that experience of Sam Collins back. Now, last week, the Suns were absolutely smashed by the Crows, while the Lions continued on their red-hot form against the Dogs. The Gold Coast form, on paper, does look pretty good before last week. They beat the Pies, and before that, they had wins over Essendon and Melbourne. However, something that would be a worrying trend for the Gold Coast is the fact that they aren't playing 4 quarters. Against the Pies, they nearly got overrun in the final term. Against the Bombers, They were neck and neck for 3/4. And going back even further, they had a chance to win against the Giants about a month ago now, but they didn't have the potency to put them away, and eventually they were overran. So if they're going to be able to be seen as a finals contender this year, the Gold Coast, they're going to have to heed the words of their coach from last year and simply grow up. You can't be a team that's taken seriously in my eyes if you continue to have these lapses in games. And against a team like the Brisbane Lions, they're not going to be given that luxury. So if the Gold Coast are going to be able to win this game, they simply have to stop the methodical ball movement of Brisbane, and they need to put pressure on the ball carrier. So I do expect a response from the Gold Coast after that insipid performance in the first half against Crows. However, I'm going to be picking Brisbane. As for one, last week really turned me off the Gold Coast. I wasn't expecting them to beat the Crows, but I was expecting at least some sort of fight. And that first half from the Gold Coast was almost a blast from the past, if I'm being honest, and not in a good way. But that's not the only reason why I'm picking the Lions here. I know they missed a couple of opportunities last week against the Bulldogs to put that game away a little bit earlier, but I think the Lions are one of the teams to beat this year. They are so balanced all over the ground. All 23 players every week play their role, and they continue to be the team, in my opinion, who can contend with the Pies this year. Now, my brother is also picking the Lions. He has said they've won 10 of the last 11 matches between the sides. He lost a lot of trust with the Gold Coast last week after their performance against the Crows, and Zach Bailey being back against the Suns is going to be tough. He also can't see the Gold Coast being able to handle McCluggage, Ashcroft, and Neal, especially if they all get off the chain. But now let's get to the next rivalry. The biggest one in football, in my opinion, especially interstate football, is the Crows up against the Power. It is the showdown. Only one team is still in finals contention. There's always something a little bit more on the line when it comes to a showdown when these two match up. The Crows right now are probably the biggest informed team in the competition, while the Power had their season ended last week against the Hawks. Now, Port Adelaide's form has been a bit up and down in more recent weeks. They've won 2 of their last 5, but those wins came against Carlton and West Coast. And it wasn't exactly a convincing performance against the Eagles a few weeks ago, as they really only were able to get away in that final turn by kicking away. So let's take a look at a few matchups that I want to take a little bit more of a deep dive into. I think that Bergman will go to Dawson. He did do that in the last showdown. I think he's going to go and tag him. Now, I know Bergman hasn't been doing these lockdown jobs in recent weeks, but I think he simply has to stop the Crows captain. Now, with Radicalea out for the rest of the season, Port Adelaide are probably going to be pretty stretched down back, so it likely means that Lachie Jones will have to play tall. So I think he probably goes to Taylor Walker, and then you can probably take your pick on Aaliyah and Zerk Thatcher if he goes to Fogarty or Thilthorpe. But something that everyone has to keep in mind for this matchup is the weather. It's early doors, but it is expected it's going to be cold and rainy throughout the Saturday afternoon into the evening in Adelaide. There's a 95% chance of rain on that day, and the maximum temperature is going to be 12 degrees. So I think with all the tools in the Crows forward line, I think they could struggle in these conditions, which does help the Power defense quite a lot. So to my tip, it's the final Ken Hinkley showdown. It's a Crows home game, a hostile environment where all the odds are against the Power. It just has that sort of feeling that the Power are going to get up for Ken. We have seen so many times before that the Port Adelaide boys just get up for Ken Hinkley when they need him most, and I think they're going to get up one last time for him. Not only do I think the Crows are kind of due for a loss, and I know it's a bit of a roughy pick, but I'm going to be picking the Power. I think they can get it done for their man. Now, my brother is also picking the Power. He's picking his side. He said he's going to back them in. Kenny's last showdown, what a way to go out. Then to beat the Adelaide Crows and mess up their top 4 credentials. And he thinks that Kenny's going to get up for one last hurrah. So I think that too. It's going to be a massive game. What a showdown to really end Ken Hinkley's career. It seems fitting that he would get him up for one more game. So why not just throw a spanner in the works and try and ruin the Crows' top 4 credentials? I think they'll make it anyway if they do lose, but it seems like sort of a Ken Hinkley type performance to come into this one. But the final game I want to take a look at is Richmond up against Collingwood. Now, look, it's simple that I'm going to be picking Collingwood here. That's a pretty obvious fact. But I want to first give some praise to the Tigers for what they've done this year. The fact that so many people, including myself, didn't really expect them to win many games at all. And for the fact now that they have 5 wins this season, 2 on the trot, is just extraordinary. So I have to say well done to the Tigers. And I also want to just take a look at a margin for this matchup, because a lot of people would be expecting that the Pies are simply just going to absolutely thump the Tigers. And yes, I mean, it very well could go that way. However, I think this game could be a lot closer than people expect. Collingwood don't tend to thump teams throughout this season, as they only won 4 4 games throughout the year by only 50 points, and none of those games have come against bottom 4 teams. So I do think Collingwood are probably going to rest some players for this match, as they've done for the last few weeks. And of course, like I said, I'm going to be tipping the Pies, but I think the margin is something you need to be cautious of if you're going to be picking the margin for this game, just to be a little bit cautious, because if the Tigers bring the sort of pressure that they did against the Eagles last week, I think the Richmond could definitely stay with Collingwood for a lot of the afternoon. But again, reiterating, I'm picking Collingwood. My brother, again, has also picked the Pies. He said that they may be resting a few players, but they'll just be simply a class above, which I tend to agree with. But for now, guys, let's get to our full tips for round 20. So my tips for round 20 are Hawthorn to beat Carlton, the Dogs to beat Essendon, Sydney to beat GWS, Brisbane to beat the Gold Coast, Fremantle to beat the West Coast Eagles, Geelong to beat North Melbourne, Port Adelaide to beat the Crows, Collingwood to beat Richmond, and St Kilda to beat Melbourne. And my brother's full tips for round 20 are Hawthorn to beat Carlton, the Dogs to beat Essendon, GWS to beat the Swans, Brisbane to beat the Gold Coast, Fremantle to beat West Coast, Geelong to beat North Melbourne, Port Adelaide to beat the Crows, Collingwood to beat the Tigers, and St Kilda to beat Melbourne. But with that being said, guys, let's now get to our certainty tips for this week. I have got the first pick this one. I have picked the Pies to beat the Tigers, of course, Collingwood losing to the Dockers last week. And my brother is going with the Western Bulldogs to beat Essendon, of course, the Dogs losing to the Lions last week. But now, guys, of course, finally, let's take a look at the AFL tipping ladder for the channel. And Leviticus got one tip on me and Braxton, us three, still sitting in the top 3 spots with the boy from SNB sitting in 4th. But Leviticus got another tip. He's jumped another spot in front of us. He is 5 tips in front of me and Braxton now, so it's going to be super, super tough for us to claw back those tips right now. I want to bring up, though, Banjo Vic, because he got 8 tips over the week, which is pretty tough. He tipped the West Coast Eagles against the Tigers, so I am never tipping them ever again, the West Coast, by the way. Absolutely deplorable performance, and that's the only thing that ruined his perfect round, because he picked Fremantle. So well done to Banjo for picking that tip. That would have been, most of Australia wouldn't have agreed with you, but good on you for picking that one. Kept his spot alive. He's 10 tips behind, so he's pretty far away. But, you know, if you pick those sort of roughies, you can make those sort of charges. So that's why I've made a couple of roughy picks this week. I've got to try and claw back from Leviticus because he continues to just pull away. 5 tips now. I've got to make the big move. I'd rather lose the tipping comp by 10 and give it a go than just sit around where I am now, sit on my morals and lose by 5 or 4. But guys, that's pretty much all we have for the preview to the new round, of course. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to check out other content on the channel, then make sure to check this video out right now.